Commander Vexhay Thornspike adjusted his ceremonial combat armor for the third time this cycle, the polished metal plates gleaming under the harsh lights of Training Deck 7. As the finest warrior of the Korthak Empire, he had earned his reputation through countless victories against the galaxy's most formidable opponents. His violet skin bore the ritual scars of 17 major campaigns, and his forearms moved with the fluid precision that had made him legendary across 12 star systems. Today, Cadets, Vexhay announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had never known defeat, you will witness true combat artistry. The assembled trainees, representing 7 different species from across the Alliance, stood at attention. Their eyes fixed on the sparring arena where 2 figures prepared for what everyone assumed would be a routine demonstration. On one side stood Cadet Jix Calveron, a promising young Korthak whose natural agility and four-armed combat style had already earned him recognition among his peers. On the other, looking almost comically small by comparison, stood the human. Cadet Maya Singh appeared unremarkable by galactic standards. She possessed only 2 arms, stood barely 1.7 meters tall, and lacked any of the natural weapons that made other species formidable in combat. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her brown eyes held a calm confidence that several of the other cadets found amusing. "Sir," Jix called out, his mandibles clicking with barely contained laughter, "are you certain this is appropriate? I wouldn't want to accidentally injure our guest." A ripple of snickers passed through the assembled cadets. The Vorthan twins, Krix and Cross, exchanged meaningful glances with their compound eyes. Even Zala Moon Whisper, the usually serious Etherian telepath, allowed herself a small smile. Maya merely shrugged, reaching for the weapon harness at her side. "Oh, don't worry about me. I'll try not to embarrass anyone too badly." The sarcasm in her voice was lost on most of the cadets, who interpreted her words as typical human bravado. They had heard stories about Earth's warriors, of course, but those tales seemed grossly exaggerated. How dangerous could a species be when they possessed no natural armor, claws, or enhanced physical capabilities? Cadet Singh, Commander Vexhay interjected, his tone professional but tinged with curiosity. "I notice you're not selecting from our standard weapons array." The Academy provides state-of-the-art plasma rifles, ion cannons, and molecular disruptors. Maya's hand moved to a worn leather sheath at her hip, one that looked almost primitive compared to the gleaming technology surrounding them. "Thanks, but I'll stick with what I know." She drew her weapon with a fluid motion that made several cadets gasp. It was a blade, but unlike anything they had ever seen. The metal appeared ancient, almost crude by their technological standards. No energy field flickered along its edge, no molecular enhancement matrix glowed within its core. It was simply steel, folded and refolded countless times, with a slight curve that spoke of centuries-old craftsmanship. "A katana," Maya said simply, noting their confused expressions. "This particular one has been in my family for about 400 years. My ancestor carried it during the Third World War, back when humans were still figuring out how to properly kill each other." Jix's laughter was loud and genuinely amused. "You brought a museum piece to a combat demonstration. Cadet, that relic wouldn't even scratch my ceremonial armor, let alone my combat plating." "Probably not," Maya agreed cheerfully, testing the blade's balance with a few practice swings. "Good thing I'm not aiming for your armor." The comment sent another wave of laughter through the group. Commander Vexhay raised one of his 4 hands for silence, though even he seemed amused by the human's apparent naivety. "Very well. Standard sparring protocols apply. First blood or submission determines the victor. Contestants, prepare yourselves." Jix activated his combat harness, and immediately his form was surrounded by a shimmering energy field. His armor, a masterwork of Korthak engineering, began to hum with power. Microservos enhanced his already impressive strength, while reactive plating shifted to provide optimal protection against anticipated attacks. He drew his dual plasma cutters, their blue-white energy crackling with enough power to slice through starship hulls. Maya simply stood there, holding her ancient sword in a relaxed grip. "This is going to be over in seconds," whispered Cadet Flux Starweaver, the young nebulite's gaseous form shimmering with anticipation. "I almost feel sorry for her," added Creeks, his insectoid features expressing what passed for sympathy among his species. Commander Vexhai studied both contestants carefully. Something about the human's posture bothered him, though he couldn't quite identify what. She stood with the easy confidence of someone who had faced death before, but that was impossible. Earth had only joined the Galactic community 50 years ago, and their military conflicts were supposedly limited to minor planetary disputes. "Begin," he commanded. Jix immediately launched himself forward with the explosive speed that made Korthak warriors so feared in close combat. His plasma cutters carved brilliant arcs through the air as he closed the distance in what should have been a decisive opening strike. Maya moved. It wasn't the desperate scramble most cadets expected. It wasn't even particularly fast by Galactic standards. It was simply perfect. She shifted her weight, turned her body at precisely the right angle, and suddenly Jix's devastating attack passed harmlessly through empty air. The katana flickered out in what appeared to be a casual counter-strike. Jix's confident roar turned into a surprised yelp as he felt resistance against his armor for the first time in his military career. The ancient blade, which should have shattered against his combat plating, instead parted the advanced materials like they were made of paper. "Impossible," breathed Zala, her telepathic abilities picking up the genuine shock radiating from both Jix and the watching cadets. Maya completed her movement and stepped back, the katana returning to a ready position as if nothing unusual had happened. A thin line of blue fluid, unmistakably Korthak blood, began to seep from a precise cut across Jix's chest plate. The training deck fell absolutely silent. "How?" Jix stammered, staring down at his armor in disbelief. "This plating can withstand direct plasma cannon fire. Your primitive weapon shouldn't be able to." "Oh, you're absolutely right," Maya interrupted, her tone conversational. "This old thing shouldn't be able to cut through modern armor at all. Funny how physics works sometimes." Commander Vexhay's 4 eyes narrowed as he examined the damage. The cut was impossibly clean, showing no signs of the thermal scarring that energy weapons typically left behind. More disturbing still, the breach had been made with surgical precision, finding the exact point where 2 armor plates joined and exploiting a gap that most warriors didn't even know existed. "Cadet Singh," he said slowly, "perhaps you could explain how a pre-space age weapon managed to penetrate military-grade combat armor?" Maya shrugged again, that same maddeningly casual gesture. "Well, Commander, I suppose it comes down to understanding the difference between technology and technique. Your armor is designed to stop energy weapons, projectiles, and brute force attacks. It's really quite impressive, actually." She paused to clean her blade with a cloth that looked as ancient as the weapon itself. "But you see, humans have been killing each other with pointy metal objects for about 10,000 years. We've gotten pretty good at finding the soft spots." "Soft spots." Crows clicked his mandibles nervously. "Sir, I scanned that armor myself. There are no structural weaknesses in the design." "Oh, there are always weaknesses," Maya replied with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You just have to know where to look. And more importantly, you have to be willing to get close enough to exploit them." Jix raised his plasma cutters again, his pride clearly wounded along with his armor. "That was luck. Pure chance. Let's see you do it again, if you insist." This time Jix was ready. He had analyzed her movement patterns, calculated her reach limitations, and adjusted his attack strategy accordingly. He came in with a complex pattern of feints and strikes designed to overwhelm any possible defense. Maya sidestepped his first swing, ducked under his second, and somehow managed to slide between his third and fourth attacks with movements that seemed to violate basic physics. The katana whispered through the air twice in quick succession. 2 more precise cuts appeared in Jix's armor, one across his left shoulder plate and another along his right thigh guard. Neither wound was deep enough to cause serious injury, but both penetrated his supposedly impenetrable defenses with embarrassing ease. "This is impossible," Flux whispered, his gaseous form rippling with confusion. "Our instructors assured us that primitive weapons were obsolete. That's why we abandoned melee combat training in favor of energy weapons and ranged systems." Commander Vexhaya was beginning to understand why the human's posture had bothered him. It wasn't the stance of a novice warrior or even a competent soldier. It was the bearing of someone who had spent years learning to kill efficiently with nothing but skill and a sharp piece of metal. "Stand down, both of you," he commanded. Jix looked ready to argue, but the multiple breaches in his armor made protest seem foolish. Maya simply sheathed her katana with the same fluid motion she had used to draw it. "Cadet Singh," the commander continued, "I think it's time you shared some information about your background. Your service record indicates you attended Earth Standard Military Academy, but I'm beginning to suspect there are details missing from your file." Maya's expression became carefully neutral. "I did attend the academy, sir. Graduated top of my class, in fact. And before that? Before that, I grew up in a place where you learned to fight or you didn't grow up at all." The training deck remained unnaturally quiet as the implications of her words sank in. The cadets had been taught that Earth was a peaceful world, recently unified under a single planetary government. The idea that humans might still engage in lethal combat for survival seemed almost barbaric. "Where exactly did you grow up, Cadet?" Vexhaya asked, though something told him he wasn't going to like the answer. "The Australian wasteland, sir, specifically the region that used to be called the Outback before the climate wars turned it into a proper desert. My family has been living out there for generations, doing whatever it takes to survive." She paused, her eyes taking on a distant look. "You see, Commander, while the rest of humanity was busy joining your galactic community and learning about advanced technology, some of us were still dealing with more basic problems, like raiders who wanted to steal our water, or territorial gangs who thought our land looked appealing, or the occasional pack of genetically modified predators that escaped from some corporate lab." The casual way she mentioned these threats made several cadets shift uncomfortably. Their own worlds had been peaceful for centuries, with conflicts resolved through diplomacy or at worst limited technological warfare. "So we learned," Maya continued, her voice taking on a harder edge. "We learned that fancy weapons jam at the worst possible moments. We learned that armor has weak points. We learned that sometimes, when everything else fails, you need something reliable, something simple, something that works." She patted the katana's sheath affectionately. "This blade has killed 17 men and women in face-to-face combat. Not in war, not in some grand military campaign, but in desperate fights for survival where the loser didn't get to go home to their family." Jix stared at her with new understanding and perhaps a touch of fear. "You're not really a cadet at all, are you?" "Oh, I'm definitely a cadet," Maya replied with that same sardonic smile. "But you're right that I'm not like the rest of you. See, Earth's military leadership decided they needed to understand how their people would perform in galactic combat situations. So they sent a few of us off-worlders to your fancy academy to see what we could learn." Commander Vexhaya felt a chill run down his spine. Off-worlders. Humans who grew up outside the unified government's protection. Wild humans, if you prefer. The kind who learned to fight before they learned to read. The kind who see a weapon as a tool, not a toy. The implications were staggering. If Earth had deliberately sent their most dangerous individuals to train alongside the galaxy's future military leaders, what did that say about human intentions? More importantly, what did it say about human capabilities? "How many of you are there?" the commander asked quietly. Maya's smile widened, showing teeth that looked uncomfortably sharp in the harsh lighting. "Oh, Commander, that would be telling." She turned to address the assembled cadets, who were now viewing her with a mixture of fascination and terror. "The thing about humans," she said conversationally, "is that we've been predators for a very long time." We spent millions of years hunting things bigger, stronger and more dangerous than ourselves. We learned to use tools, work in groups and exploit every possible advantage. She gestured to Jix's damaged armor. Your technology is impressive, truly. But technology has limitations. It can malfunction, run out of power, or simply fail when you need it most. Skill, on the other hand, doesn't require batteries. But surely, Crix protested, his voice carrying a desperate edge, surely humans can't compete with species that have natural advantages. My people have been warriors for 10,000 years. And my people, Maya replied gently, have been survivors for 10 million. The distinction hit the cadets like a physical blow. Warriors fought according to rules, traditions and codes of honor. Survivors did whatever was necessary to live another day. Commander Vexhai realized he was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. For centuries, species had joined the alliance based on their technological contributions or unique biological capabilities. Humans had been accepted primarily because of their rapid adaptation to space travel and their impressive industrial capacity. But no one had seriously considered their potential as warriors. I think, he said carefully, we need to reassess our training protocols. Maya nodded approvingly. That would probably be wise, sir. Because if this little demonstration taught you anything, it should be that sometimes the old ways work better than the new ones. She began walking toward the exit, then paused and looked back over her shoulder. Oh, and Commander, you might want to check with your superiors about something. You see, Earth didn't just send wild humans to your military academies. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. We also sent them to your diplomatic corps, your trade organizations, your scientific research stations, and pretty much everywhere else humans have been welcomed over the past 50 years. With that cheerful bombshell, she left the training deck, leaving behind a group of cadets who were finally beginning to understand that their assumptions about humanity might have been dangerously naive. Commander Vexhai stared at the door through which she had departed, his mind racing through the implications. If Maya Singh was representative of human capabilities, then the galaxy's balance of power was about to shift dramatically. And somehow he suspected that had always been the plan. But 3 standard cycles later, Commander Vexhai found himself standing in the pristine corridors of Alliance High Command, his dress uniform bearing the weight of medals he had earned through decades of distinguished service. The summons had come without warning, delivered by a courier whose nervous demeanor suggested the matter was both urgent and classified beyond normal security protocols. Admiral Corvin Stormscale, the Alliance's supreme military commander, was a draconian whose scales had turned the deep silver that marked centuries of experience. His reptilian features showed no emotion as he reviewed the holographic display floating above his desk, but Vexhai had served under enough commanders to recognize barely controlled fury when he saw it. Commander, the Admiral began, his voice carrying the subtle hiss that marked his species, I've been reviewing your incident report regarding Cadet Singh. I find myself wondering if you might have embellished certain details. Sir, I assure you that every word in my report is accurate. I have supporting testimony from 12 cadets and full sensor recordings of the entire encounter. Admiral Stormscale manipulated the hologram, and suddenly Maya Singh's image appeared in 3-dimensional detail. The recording showed her casual destruction of Jix's armor with surgical precision, but more importantly, it captured her final words about human infiltration throughout galactic society. Tell me, Commander, in your professional opinion, was she bluffing? Vexhai considered his response carefully. No, sir, I don't believe she was. Her entire demeanor suggested someone delivering information rather than making threats. She seemed almost amused by our ignorance. Amused, the Admiral repeated, his claws clicking against his desk's surface. How delightful. Do you have any idea what your little training demonstration has cost us? Before Vexhai could respond, the office door slid open to admit Captain Luna Brightwater, the Alliance's head of intelligence operations. The Etherin's translucent blue skin seemed more agitated than usual, her normally serene features tight with concern. "Admiral, we've completed the preliminary investigation you requested. The results are troubling." She activated her own holographic display, filling the room with streams of data that made Vexhai's head spin. Names, locations, service records and psychological profiles cascaded through the air in dizzying arrays. "We identified 47 humans currently serving in positions throughout Alliance space who match the profile Cadet Singh described. All claim to be from remote Earth settlements, all possess unusually advanced combat training. And all were recruited during the same general timeframe as humanity's integration into galactic society." Admiral Stormscale's tail lashed behind him, a sure sign of agitation. 47 confirmed infiltrators? "That's just the ones we could identify with certainty," Captain Brightwater corrected. "Our analysis suggests there could be 3 times that number scattered across military installations, diplomatic missions, trade organizations and research facilities." The implications struck Vexhai like a physical blow. "They've been planning this for 50 years. "Longer," Luna replied grimly. "We've traced some of these individuals back to Earth's initial contact with galactic civilization. They didn't just send explorers and diplomats, Commander. They sent scouts." Admiral Stormscale stood and moved to the massive viewport that dominated one wall of his office. Beyond the transparent aluminum, the jeweled lights of the capital world's nightside sparkled like scattered stars. "Have we made contact with Earth's government about this matter?" "We tried," Captain Brightwater said, her voice carrying notes of frustration. Their response was interesting. They claimed to have no knowledge of any military infiltration program. According to their records, all humans serving in Alliance space are legitimate volunteers who applied through proper channels. "And you believe them?" "I believe they're telling the technical truth. Their official government genuinely doesn't know about this operation, which suggests it's being run by someone else entirely." Vexhai felt his stomach clench as the pieces began falling into place. It's the wild humans, the ones Maya mentioned who grew up outside government protection. Exactly. Earth's official leadership represents the civilized majority, but apparently they're not the only human faction with interstellar ambitions. Admiral Stormscale turned back to face his subordinates, his ancient eyes holding depths of experience that had guided the Alliance through numerous crises. "Captain, what's your assessment of the threat level?" Luna consulted her data streams before responding. "That depends entirely on their intentions, sir. If this is simply an intelligence-gathering operation, we might be able to contain the damage through diplomatic channels. But if they're positioning assets for something more aggressive..." She let the implications hang in the air like a poisonous cloud. "There's another possibility we need to consider," Vexhai said reluctantly. "What if this isn't about gathering intelligence or preparing for conflict? What if they're trying to understand us?" Both senior officers turned to stare at him, their expressions demanding elaboration. Maya's demonstration wasn't really about proving human superiority. It was about showing us something we'd forgotten. Every species in the Alliance has been so focused on technological advancement that we've neglected the fundamentals of personal combat. We've become dependent on systems that can fail. Your point, Commander? My point, Admiral, is that maybe they're not here to conquer us. Maybe they're here to teach us something we need to learn. The suggestion seemed almost absurd given the circumstances, but Vexhai found himself remembering Maya's final smile. There had been no malice in it, no triumph over defeated enemies. Instead, there had been something that looked almost like concern. That's a rather optimistic interpretation, Captain Brightwater observed. What makes you think humans are interested in helping rather than exploiting us? Because... Vexhai said slowly, pieces of a larger puzzle beginning to form in his mind. If they wanted to hurt us, they wouldn't have revealed themselves. Maya could have continued her training, graduated, and taken a position somewhere sensitive. And instead, she made sure we knew exactly what she was capable of. Admiral Stormscale's expression shifted from anger to thoughtful consideration. You think she was delivering a message? I think she was delivering a warning. Before anyone could respond, the office's communication system chimed with an incoming priority transmission. The Admiral activated the system, and suddenly the room filled with the image of Ambassador Elena Vasquez, Earth's chief diplomatic representative to the Alliance. Admiral Stormscale, she began without preamble, I understand you've been having some interesting conversations about my people lately. The ambassador was human, obviously, but she possessed none of Maya's dangerous edge. Instead, she projected the calm competence of someone accustomed to navigating complex political situations. Ambassador, the Admiral replied carefully, we have indeed discovered some concerning irregularities in human personnel assignments throughout Alliance space. I imagine you have, and I'm sure you're wondering whether my government has been lying to you about our intentions. The thought had occurred to us. Ambassador Vasquez smiled, and for just a moment Vexhai caught a glimpse of something that reminded him strongly of Maya Singh. Not dangerous exactly, but definitely more complex than it initially appeared. Admiral, may I share a story with you? About 300 years ago, my homeworld faced a crisis that nearly destroyed our entire civilization. Climate change, resource depletion and territorial conflicts had pushed us to the brink of extinction. She paused, her expression becoming distant. We survived, obviously, but not everyone agreed on how we should move forward. The majority wanted to unite under a single planetary government, focus on healing our world, and eventually reach out to join the galactic community as peaceful partners. And the minority? The minority believed that peaceful intentions weren't enough. They argued that any species capable of nearly destroying itself through infighting would eventually face external threats that required more direct solutions. So they made a choice. The ambassador's image shifted, displaying what appeared to be historical footage of harsh landscapes and scattered settlements. They went into the wastelands, the places where survival required constant vigilance and uncompromising pragmatism. They raised their children to be harder than the rest of us, more capable of violence when violence became necessary. And when we finally developed interstellar travel, they volunteered to be our advance scouts. Captain Brightwater leaned forward intently. Scouts for what purpose? To make sure the galaxy was safe for the rest of us. The simple statement carried implications that left the room in stunned silence. You see, Ambassador Vasquez continued, my people have learned something about survival that most species never discover. The greatest threats don't usually announce themselves with military parades or diplomatic ultimatums. They hide among you, learn your weaknesses, and strike when you're least prepared. Admiral Stormscale's claws were extending and retracting rhythmically, a nervous habit he had developed during his military career. Are you telling us that humans infiltrated the Alliance to protect it? I'm telling you that humans infiltrated the Alliance to evaluate it. We needed to know whether galactic civilization was genuinely peaceful or simply dormant. Whether your species had truly evolved beyond territorial aggression or had simply gotten better at disguising it. And what did you conclude? The ambassador's expression grew somber. We concluded that you're vulnerable. Dangerously vulnerable. Your military training focuses almost entirely on technological solutions. Your security protocols assume that threats will come from outside your borders, and your leadership has grown complacent after centuries of relative peace. Vexhai felt a chill that had nothing to do with the office's temperature controls. Vulnerable to what? To anything that doesn't follow your rules, Maya Singh's voice said from the doorway. Everyone turned to see the human cadet standing at the office entrance, though none of them had heard the door open. She was no longer wearing her academy uniform, instead dressed in simple civilian clothing that somehow made her appear more dangerous rather than less. Maya, Ambassador Vasquez said with what sounded like genuine fondness, I told you to wait outside. I got bored. Besides, I think they're ready to hear the rest of the story. She moved into the room with that same fluid grace Vexhai remembered from the training deck. taking a position where she could see all three Alliance officers simultaneously. The thing is, she continued conversationally, while my people were scattered throughout your territory learning about your capabilities, we also discovered something else. Something that makes your current security concerns seem almost trivial. Admiral Stormscale's patience was clearly wearing thin. And what might that be? You're not alone out here. The statement hung in the air like a death sentence. There are other civilizations in this galaxy, Maya explained, her tone becoming deadly serious. Civilizations that have been watching your alliance for decades, studying your expansion patterns, analyzing your technological capabilities, and waiting for the right moment to make contact. That's impossible, Captain Brightwater protested. Our deep space sensors would have detected any large-scale civilization. Your sensors detect what you expect to find. Ships using fusion drives, communication signals based on electromagnetic radiation, industrial signatures that match your own technological development patterns. But what if someone took a different path? What if they learned to hide in plain sight? She activated a small device that projected a three-dimensional star map into the center of the room. Red markers appeared at dozens of locations throughout Alliance space, each one pulsing like a warning beacon. These are the locations where human scouts have detected evidence of non-Alliance activity. Sensor readings that don't match any known phenomena, gravitational anomalies that suggest massive objects in empty space, and communication intercepts using technologies we don't recognize. The map was terrifying in its implications. The markers weren't concentrated at the Alliance's borders where external threats might be expected. Instead, they were scattered throughout inhabited space, suggesting that whatever was out there had already achieved significant penetration. Why are you telling us this? Admiral Stormscale asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Because Ambassador Vasquez replied, despite our concerns about Alliance security, we've decided that humanity's future is tied to yours. We can't survive alone if something hostile decides to move against galactic civilization. Maya nodded agreement. Besides, you're not nearly as helpless as you think. Your technology is impressive, your industrial capacity is enormous, and your species' diversity provides advantages that no single civilization could match. But you've forgotten how to fight dirty, how to think like predators instead of prey, how to win when the rules don't apply anymore. She gestured to the katana at her side. That's what we're really here for. Not to conquer you or replace you, but to remind you that sometimes survival requires more than advanced technology and good intentions. Commander Vexhay found himself looking at the human cadet with new understanding. You're not infiltrators at all, are you? You're teachers. We're whatever we need to be, Maya replied with that familiar sardonic smile. But yes, primarily we're here to help you remember something your species used to know before you became civilized. Which is that the universe doesn't care about your politics, your ethics, or your technological achievements. It only cares about whether you're strong enough to survive whatever comes next. Admiral Stormscale stared at the star map for several long moments, his ancient mind processing implications that stretched far beyond anything he had faced in his long career. What do you propose? Joint training programs, Ambassador Vasquez said immediately. Human combat specialists working alongside your military personnel to develop new tactical doctrines. Technology sharing agreements that combine our survival experience with your advanced manufacturing capabilities. And intelligence cooperation to track whatever's hiding in your territory. In exchange for... Maya's grin widened, showing those uncomfortably sharp teeth again. In exchange for the chance to find out whether galactic civilization is worth saving. The statement should have been insulting, but somehow it came across as a challenge rather than a threat. A dare to prove that the Alliance's ideals could survive contact with a hostile universe. Very well, Admiral Stormscale said finally. I'll present your proposal to the High Council. But I want guarantees that this cooperation will be transparent. No more secret infiltrations or hidden agendas. Deal, both humans said simultaneously. As the meeting concluded and the various participants began filing out of the office, Vexhay found himself walking alongside Maya toward the corridor. "Cadet," he said quietly, "may I ask you something?" "Sure." "That day in the training deck, when you cut through Jix's armor so easily, was that really just superior technique, or was there something else involved?" Maya paused in the doorway, turning to give him that unsettling smile one more time. "Commander, would you like to know the real secret behind human combat effectiveness?" "Very much. And it's not that we're stronger or faster or more technologically advanced than anyone else. It's that we're absolutely, completely, utterly convinced that we can win any fight we're forced to enter." She patted the katana's worn grip affectionately. "This blade has killed 17 people not because it's magical or technologically superior, but because I believed it could cut through anything that stood between me and staying alive. Belief, Commander, is the most powerful weapon in the universe." With that final piece of wisdom, she disappeared into the corridor traffic, leaving Vexhay to wonder whether humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy would be their combat skills or their unshakable confidence in the face of impossible odds. Either way, he suspected, things were about to become very interesting indeed.